Hello, my friends. About a month ago, when the first aid packages from the US arrived after a long pause, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to stabilize the situation on the front. Every day I mentioned that there were no changes on the front lines. Overall, things were going well. But today, unfortunately, we see that almost every day the Russians are advancing, not just by 100 meters, but by several kilometers a day. And it's happening not just in one direction, but across the entire front line. If the Russians were advancing in just one direction, we could say that they concentrated all their reserves, for example, in the Pokrovsk direction, and that's why they have successes. But as we can see, they are advancing almost everywhere on the front, which indicates a significant advantage in their forces, not only in the personnel of the Russian army, but also in equipment and especially aviation, through which the Russians are advancing today. Therefore, only F-16s can somehow stop the Russians, but considering they are still not here, and if they do arrive, it will be in minimal quantities. I'm forced to say that a major breakthrough is unlikely to happen. As we see, we're constantly promised substantial aid, but in reality, what arrives is enough at best just to maintain the defense. So for now, we have to watch how the Russians continue to seize Ukrainian land. Let's start our overview on the front situation with the Kharkiv direction. And even here, there is bad news today. The Ukrainian forces report that the Russians have completely captured Hlyboke. Despite attempts by the Ukrainian forces to counterattack and clear the village, the Russians have managed to turn the situation in their favor. In the Vovchansk area, the fighting also continues. The Russians managed to periodically break through. However, as a result of street fighting, the Ukrainian forces still managed to break their groups. So for now, the front line here remains unchanged. Starting from the Kupiansk direction, there are already significant breakthroughs in our defenses. It's important to emphasize that today, in the Kupiansk direction, the Russians are reclaiming territory that the Ukrainian forces had liberated during the counteroffensive. It's very sad that we couldn't establish sufficiently strong defensive lines, but the topic of defense lines is a separate issue. For now, we see that the Russians are advancing towards the water barrier and Kupiansk on a very broad front. In fact, they are even trying to encircle Kupiansk. The General Staff reports that attacks are already being repelled near the village of Kindrashivka, which indicates that they are breaking through from Liman Pershi. Not long ago, reports from the Ukrainian forces indicated that the Russians were too afraid to even raise their heads and were not showing any activity. But today, we see a completely different picture. The Russians have thrown a huge number of reserves into the battle and are attempting to achieve successes. There are also ongoing battles for Sinkivka, Petropavlivka, then Hlushkivka, and that's it. So, as can be seen, many settlements in this section of the front have fallen under the control of the Russians. In the Svatove area, the Russians have also advanced 2 kilometers and 800 meters towards the water barrier. Today, the fighting is concentrated only in the Berestove area. We are currently waiting to see how events will develop further. In the Kremina direction, the Russians are assaulting Terny, but the activity here is low and the Russians haven't had any success. Over the past day, the front line hasn't changed. However, in the Siversk direction, the Russians have achieved successes again. According to the Minister of Defense, they have captured Ivanodaryivka, which is most likely true. Today they continue to assault Vyhlemka, Verkhnyokamyanske, and Pereizhne. As a result of these advances, today only 6 kilometers and 200 meters remain to the outskirts of Siversk. In the Soledar area, the Russians are also having significant successes. There was previously no activity here, but now they are assaulting Vasyukivka and breaking through to the village of Bondarne. They are also attacking Minkivka and assaulting Orikhovo-Vasilievka. Many might remember that the Ukrainian forces conducted counterattacks here and had liberated Orikhovo-Vasilievka during their counteroffensive. Back then, there was hope that by cutting the flanks, the Ukrainian forces would liberate Bakhmut. However, as we can see, the defense of Chasiv Yar is now ongoing. It seems the Russians are not just extending the front line for no reason. If you aid the grand zone, where the Russians are already advancing with their offensive actions, it's clear that they are stretching the front line towards Sloviansk. In Chasiv Yar itself, there is maximum activity. The Russians are assaulting the Novy microdistrict, trying to take it completely under their control. There are also ongoing battles for Gregorivka, and they are attempting to break through the fields to bypass Chasiv Yar. Simultaneously, the assaults on Ivanivska, Klashivka, and Andriivka continue. They are even trying to advance towards Bila Hora. Yesterday, they also managed to make some progress, and as we can see, they are frequently having successes in this sector of the front. Consequently, the front line is gradually approaching Kostiantynivka. As of today, it's 9.5 kilometers to the outskirts of the city. In the Toretsk direction, the situation is no easier. Here, the Russians are managing to advance near New York. The village of Oleksandropol is now under great threat. They had previously assaulted it, but now, due to their success in stretching the front line across the fields, the situation has seriously deteriorated. Meanwhile, the Russians continue to move closer to Toretsk. It appears that Pivdenne has also come under the control of the Russians. Fighting is still ongoing for Pivnichne, while Zalizne has been partially captured by the Russians. However, the Russians are not able to break through near Diliivka. The Ukrainian forces are managing to hold off all attacks there. In the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians have thrown a huge amount of force to expand the territory near Vozdvyzhenka in order to break through to the highway. They are now moving towards Timofeivka, which is here, and the general staff reports that the fighting is still ongoing around Lozovatska. Although the Ukrainian forces state that the village is already in the gray zone, the Russians are also continue to assault Vozdvyzhenka, and fighting is taking place in the area of Novo-Oleksandrivka. Moreover, after capturing the village of Progress, the Russians are actively moving further, and several groups are breaking through towards Ivanivka. And from Progress across the fields, trying to expand the controlled territory to reach the village of Vesele. The shelling is continuing at maximum intensity, and overall the situation here is catastrophic. But there are no changes along the front line near Kharkivka. All the Russian groups attempting to break through are being destroyed for now. Additionally, after prolonged fighting, the situation has deteriorated in the direction of Kurakhove. Here, the Russians continue to gradually capture Krasnohorivka in small sections. Heorhiivka has also come completely under their control, and the Russians have entered the outskirts of Maximilianivka. Thus, now only 5 kilometers and 800 meters remain from the front line to Kurakhove. Furthermore, assaults on Paraskovivka are ongoing. Part of the village is already under the control of the Russians, and they are attempting to advance further. In the Vuhledar direction, shelling continues for now, but in recent days, the Russians have also made several successful advances. It appears they have almost approached Velika Novosilka and even attempted to storm Vuhledar. However, the Ukrainian forces repelled the attacks, and today the Russians are preparing reserves for new major assaults. For now, only shelling is being carried out. What's going on? In the Zaporizhzhia direction, attacks near Robotyne and towards Mala Tokmachka continue. There have been no changes along the front line here so far. However, there are unofficial reports that the Ukrainian forces have liberated Robotyne. We're still waiting for official information. In the Kherson direction, the Russians are intensifying shelling on the right bank and even targeting civilians with FPV drones. Meanwhile, attempts to completely push the Ukrainian forces from the breachhead near Kozachi Laheri continue. This is official information, so for now it stands as such. However, friends, today's statements from Russian war correspondents are shocking. They are talking about plans to transfer forces to the right bank. Teplinsky is starting to slowly prepare the informational groundwork for the planned transfer of troops to the right bank of the Dnipro. On channels under the commander's control, videos are appearing showing soldiers practicing crossing water obstacles and landing on unprepared shores in the Kherson region. We all understand well that such videos don't appear out of nowhere. They are published after thorough checks and approval by all responsible persons up to the commanders. Friends, of course, today the Ukrainian side is saying that the Russians are conducting information propaganda and simply trying to intimidate us. But if we look at the facts, they similarly threatened an offensive on Kharkiv, and as we see, they managed to capture some territory there and drew many Ukrainian forces there. Now they are threatening to return to Kherson. And we see that the Russians have a lot of resources. Therefore, it cannot be ruled out that they might actually carry out such an operation. If the Ukrainian forces manage to land on the left bank and hold a bridgehead for quite a long time, then the Russians, with their resources, could also conduct such an operation on the right bank. Thus, we could expect the situation to escalate. Meanwhile, Kuleba has arrived in China to discuss peace plan.
Привіт, Україно! З далекого Китаю. Довга дорога, 2 дні займає, але воно того варте, тому що розмова про мир в Україні варта будь-яких зусиль і будь-якого часу відповідно на неї хочеться якомога швидше. Перший візит міністра закордонних справ України до Китаю з початку повномасштабного вторгнення і перший візит міністра закордонних справ України, повноцінний двосторонній візит з 2012 року. Я думаю, що дата говорить сама за себе. Будуть переговори, розлоги, вітальні, предметні. В центрі уваги одне питання – мир в Україні. Будемо говорити, будемо шукати точки дотику. Нам потрібно уникнути конкуренції мирних планів. Нам потрібно рухатися до справедливого і сталого миру, і Китай може відіграти в цьому важливу роль. Поїхали працювати.
However, as we know, the Chinese leader fully supports Russia and didn't even attend the first peace summit. So we are waiting to see what the results will be. Meanwhile, Biden appeared in public for the first time after stepping out of the presidential race. Many had spread fake news about his death. The media has repeatedly buried both Putin and now Biden, but as we can see, they are both alive. Also, there are many questions about the upcoming US elections. According to the latest polls, most people are leaning towards Harris, and Trump is in second place. Harris leads Trump in the first poll with 42% to 42%, according to Reuters. However, the difference is within the margin of error of 3 percentage points. However, there is still concern that if Trump becomes president of the USA, support for Ukraine could significantly decrease. Trump is likely to reduce aid to Ukraine and force Zelensky to agree to a peace deal heavily skewed in Russia's favor, writes Time in an article titled Ukraine's Plan to Survive Trump. The first 8 to 10 months, essentially the entire year of 2025, will be very tough, a Ukrainian official told the publication. At the same time, Ukraine is counting on help from its European allies and the US military-industrial complex, which could profit greatly from continuing to produce weapons to Ukraine. In recent months, Zelensky and his team have been working to strengthen ties with Trump's allies in Congress and other individuals close to him. No one wants what will happen. We just have to respect the institution of US elections and hope for the best. It's extremely difficult to predict how events will unfold, so for now we wait. But unfortunately, during this period of waiting, Ukraine is losing territory and people. And that's all from me. So please, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.